Through 6 decades and 101 films, Bette Davis made a magnificent spectacle of herself on screen.
George!
She schemed.
Not trying to get rid of me, are you? Don't be silly.
She smoked.
Thanks, Bill.
That's all right.
She seduced.
At school, I was known as the athletic type.
Oh, yeah?
She suffered.
Go on, torture me. Go on, torture me. You like making fun of me, don't you? You think it's fun making fun of me, don't you?
She sacrificed.
I run along.
She snapped out memorable Bette Davis lines.
I'd like to kiss you, but I just washed my hair. Bye. What a dump.
Bette Davis said it all.
Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
Hello, I'm Jodie Foster. Bette Davis kept a pillow at home embroidered with the motto, "No guts, no glory." By the end of her 58-year career in movies, with 2 Oscars and 10 nominations, she'd accumulated as much glory as any actress in Hollywood, and had the enemies to prove it. Proud and willful, she fought her way to the top, battling studio heads and directors, husbands and lovers, co-stars and friends. She fought for her art, and sometimes she fought just for the hell of it. She was a professional, who knew in the end that all that matters was the work on screen. No star left behind such a generous legacy.
I get very irritated when people say, "Did you have fun making that movie?" Well, there's no such thing. It is work, work, work.
Early on, Bette was thought of as the female James Cagney.
You can't talk about him like that.
I'll talk about it any way I like.
You can't make yourself clean and making him dirty.
He's a chiseler just the same as
He's
me.
a gentleman, you're a crook.
Oh, looks like you've done all right with you already.
Just what do you mean by that?
Do you need a diagram?
No one had seen the likes of her raw energy.
I think I'm going to scream.
No. Be careful. There are guests here, dear.
I'm sure I'm going to scream.
Honey, please.
She came to embody the spirit of the 30s emancipated woman.
Let's get married. So I'll have the right to be with you.
Right means something. No one has any rights about me except me. How about a Welsh rarebit?
You know my weakness.
And in the heyday of the women's films in the 40s, Bette brought intelligence and wit to a teary genre.
Do you mean to stand there and tell me that your friendship for Millie would mean more to you than your love for me?
Press, I know it's hard for a man to understand. All I know is that it's something I just couldn't do, whether it was Millie or any other woman who was a friend of mine.
Refusing to be typecast, she could be a vain New York socialite.
Fanny, a woman is beautiful when she's loved, and only then.
Nonsense. A woman is beautiful if she has 8 hours sleep and goes to the beauty parlor every day. And bone structure has a lot to do with it, too.
Or a small-town Madame Bovary.
If I don't get out of here, I'll die. If I don't get out of here, I hope I die.
She might be Bette the Good.
Sometimes in the middle of the night, when I have been desperately tired, I have lain awake making plans. Large and small, sensible and silly. Plans for you. And you say I have no interest in you.
Bette the Bad. Or sometimes Bette the Mad.
What else might a Habsburg have expected from the word of a bourgeois Bonaparte? You charlatan! But you will not dare let him die. I will denounce you in every court of Europe for what you will be. A murderer! A murderer!
I could never be second best. If I had to be second best in a business, I would go into another business.
Bette Davis was a stubborn mass of contradictions. An egotist with little vanity, a flamboyant diva with a stern Yankee soul. On screen, every move she made was decisive and purposeful. But her real life was filled with ambivalence. There was a paradox in her character. She craved relationships, but put her career before her personal life. She desired strong, authoritarian men, yet rebelled against them tooth and nail. She wanted a husband who would dominate her, yet 3 of her 4 husbands were men she couldn't respect. The trouble started with the first man in her life to break her heart, her father. Bette was born Ruth Elizabeth Davis on April 5th, 1908, in Lowell, Massachusetts. Her father, Edward Harlow Davis, was a distant and unloving man. When Bette was 7, he separated from her mother, Ruth. A few years later, they divorced, a scandalous event in 1918 New England, and one that contributed to Bette's lifelong mistrust of men. Her younger sister, Bobby, was troubled and unstable. Bette took care of her for most of her life.
What was life like while you and Bette were in school, Bobby?
Well, we were in and out of schools all the time. And our mother and father were divorced. And my mother worked as a photographer to pay for the different tuitions. Mm-hmm. We were sort of 3 against the world.
Headstrong and dominating, Bette was a girl who craved attention. As a young girl, dance provided her first spotlight.
Well, I saw a play in Boston with an actress named Peg Entwistle, who looked so like me. And that started me thinking. My mother, however, was the one who saw to it that I went to the dramatic school and did all the things to prepare for being an actress.
In 1928, Bette made her stage debut in a repertory company directed by George Cukor and was dismissed 2 months later. Undaunted, the following year she made her Broadway debut in Broken Dishes. In 1930, Bette attracted the attention of Universal Studios talent scout David Werner, and they signed her to a $300 a week contract.
I rather dreaded changing from the theater to films, but I felt very deeply that it was a new medium. I certainly should try it. I never thought I would ever be a box office person. Because you see, when I went there in 30, imagine looking at me after they'd been looking at these really beautiful women that had been in silent pictures for years. You know, imagine seeing Jean Harlow and then I come through the gate, you know. And because I started in the theater and stage actors, it wasn't important how you looked.
At 22, Bette made her first picture, The Bad Sister. The studio men contemptuously referred to her as the Little Brown Wren.
What's the matter?
Oh, nothing, only it's my head. I'm so tired. Would you mind awfully if I went to bed?
A year and 5 forgettable pictures later, Universal dropped Bette's contract. George Arliss, a former teacher at Bette's drama school and star at Warner Brothers, gave Bette a second chance. He insisted Bette play opposite him in The Man Who Played God.
But
Don't you love me at all?
of course I love you. But I'm old and easily flattered. I'm moved by your youth and beauty and emotion.
They kept their new contract player busy. In 13 months, Bette made 9 pictures.
No, I think I was in the luckier day because of the big studio that was behind you. They really were behind you. And you know, you had a contract, and if one film didn't work out quite as well in the beginning, they would let you do another till you learned your business.
Overworked as she was, outtakes on the set show she kept her sense of humor.
Help me, dear God, help me. I'm caught on his mind. Here's to the very halls of Montezuma. Of course, I can't move my head, because if I do, my entire damn wig will come off. Don't take any chances now.
Chances? What's all the emergency about?
I've just had a baby in the ladies' room.
Jack Warner was a master of efficient assembly line productions. The The studio he and his brothers Harry and Albert ran hit its stride during the Depression, making hard-hitting gangster movies. Warner Brothers was a tough place for an ambitious young actress to make her mark.
I must say I never couldn't get in and see Jack. And the other thing, I always could go to him because he was the head man. Why go through 10 other people with messages? We had a pretty smashing relationship. And one thing, he did respect me. Because at least I was honest and came out and said what was what. We really, in the long run, respected each other. I think he finally did respect me. He said so once anyway.
Ironically, it wasn't until Bette was loaned out to RKO for A Human Bondage that Warner realized her potential.
I was the luckiest girl in the world, and the only reason I received the part was that none of the name women in Hollywood of that day would play her. She was the first really bitch heroine.
You disgust me.
I disgust you. You. You're too fine. You won't have none of me, but you'll sit here all night looking at your naked females.
Mildred.
You cad. You dirty swine. I never cared for you, not once. I was always making a fool of you. You bored me stiff. I hated you. It made me sick when I had to let you kiss me. I only did it because you begged me. You hounded me. You drove me crazy. And after you kissed me, I always used to wipe my mouth. Wipe my mouth!
And when I came back, Warner is supposed to have said, well, they finally found out her type.
Her tough image was reinforced in the movie Dangerous.
Hurt me. You delight me. You have the most amazing lack of humor of anyone I've ever known. I should laugh at you, should I? But I can't help it. You were so awkward that I almost laughed in your face at first, and then it made me quite sick to think that anyone could be stupid enough to be taken in by a lot of old tricks. I thought you might at least be amusing, but you turned out to be dull and stupid and so afraid. Well, you needn't be. I won't hurt your Sunday school romance or your oh-so-nice career. Hurt me? Get out of here before you give me hysterics!
Bette won her first Oscar for it, though she considered it a consolation prize for A Human Bondage.
Very pleased. Everybody who's voted for me in the Academy, and all the people all over the country who have wished this year that I would get it.
In 1932, while making Cabin in the Cotton, Bette married her first husband, childhood sweetheart Ham Nelson.
I have to tell you how old-fashioned I was. I married before I lost my virginity. What's more, I was 26 years old, and it almost killed me to wait.
A gentle, unassuming musician, Ham was a bad match. The more passive he became, the more she felt the need to humiliate him. Despite the Oscar, Warner's continued to cast her in second-rate projects. Being a contract player, she had to take any role any director assigned her. It meant that the studio had the option to drop her every 6 months, but until her contract was up, she couldn't quit. Bette was in constant battle with the studio over money, her workload, and the quality of her movies. Refusing to start a new film until her terms were met, she was put on suspension. Walking out on Warner's, the 28-year-old Bette went to London to make a film for another company. The studio took her to court. She lost and had to come back and fulfill her obligations.
I haven't any idea how I had the guts to do that whole thing. I have no idea. But when you're young, and wanting to get somewhere, that's a terrific incentive.
She may have lost her case, but Warner's got the message. And under production chief Hal Wallace, they began to purchase stronger properties for their rising star.
Hal Wallace was really that studio. When he was the executive producer under Jack, he was the one that bought all those incredible things for me, all those great Broadway plays. I am indebted to Hal Wallace, who is head of production under Jack Warner. I thank him for the unbelievable opportunities he gave me as an actress.
Since Gone with the Wind belonged to David O. Selznick, Warner's wanted to compete with a Southern epic of their own. They purchased Jezebel for Bette to play a headstrong Southern belle and hired the German-born perfectionist, William Wyler, to direct. It was the start of her greatest period on film. And in 40 Take Wyler, as he was known, Davis finally met her match. He forced her to drop her nervous mannerisms and taught her the power of silence and simplicity. So many directors are such weak sisters, Bette said, that I'd have to take over. They offered me none of the security that this tyrant did. While shooting Jezebel, they became lovers.
My first fine, great director was William Wyler. And that was really the beginning. That was really what made me a permanent above the title star.
In Jezebel, a defiant Bette scandalizes the town and lover Henry Fonda when she chooses to wear a red dress rather than virginal white to the annual ball. Later, hoping to win Fonda back, she begs forgiveness.
Are you remembering the time you wanted me to wear white?
Julie, you're lovely.
I put on this white dress for you. To help me tell you how humbly I ask you to forgive me. Press, I'm kneeling to you.
Julie, don't.
To ask you to forgive me and love me as I love you.
Julie, please. Julie, this is Amy, my wife.
Your wife?
Hank's contract on Jezebel said we must finish him on a certain date because he was going to have a child. So we got through with him in time, which meant that all my intimate scenes with her father, I had to keep all my close shots.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes, until after he left. So for weeks after he left for this birth, I was, you know, looking into a blank space and pretending. It really was murder. But any actor who causes me this much trouble and can produce a Jane Fonda, I'll go through it all over again.
In 1939, at the age of 30, she won her second Oscar. That same year, she and Ham ended their 6-year marriage in a bitter divorce. Wyler and Davis worked together again 2 years later on Somerset Maugham's The Letter. She gave one of her greatest performances as a married woman who murders her lover.
Tell me, now, this minute, do you love me?
Yes, I do.
No, I can't.
Leslie, what is it? Leslie, what is it?
With all my heart, I still love the man I killed.
By the time of their third collaboration a year later on The Little Foxes, Wyler and Davis were constantly at each other's throats. But Wyler remained a lifelong admirer.
Mr. Wyler, you directed Bette Davis in 3 pictures. Yes, come right here. Was she difficult? Sit down.
Difficult? No. Easy? No. What I mean is, she was difficult in a sense. I think every good actress is, or should be, difficult by being very demanding of everyone, most of all from herself. She wanted everything to be perfect and to be great, and most of the time it was.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is my all-time hero as a director and the greatest one this town ever had, and you know I mean that. Don't I, Willie?
Thank you.
Davis always said the dying socialite in Dark Victory was her favorite role.
Well, of course, one of the great scripts, one of the great stories of all time. Took me about 3 years to get Warner to let me make it. I used to go under my arm to his office. And he would say, what a depressing story about a girl who dies. And I said, it's not depressing, it's uplifting, because she died so beautifully.
You will water my flowers, won't you, Anne? Take care of them. And Anne, you will take care of my doctor, won't you? He'll need someone. He mustn't be alone. You see, it's so much worse for him than it is for me. Oh, really, that's true. I'm the lucky one. All I'll miss is growing old and being tired and worn out. Never leave him, will you? But promise. Don't, Anne. I'm happy, really I am.
And he said, well, it won't make a dime, but we'll let you play it. Well, thank God he was wrong.
After 5 films with him, Bette became involved with her frequent co-star, George Brent, one of the busiest ladies' men in Hollywood.
Darling, there's been no one but you. Darling, how good it is to call you that again. I had to come and tell you, no one. See, I couldn't go on with the thought that you might be bitter toward me. I didn't want you to think of me like that.
But I love you, Judy.
I know you do.
In Dark Victory, he fell in love with me, but I realized it was a good thing that we never married. He was an actor, and I always said I'd never marry actors.
I've crammed every minute so full of waste.
While shooting The Sisters, Bette had an affair with her director, Anatole Litvak, who was married to actress Miriam Hopkins. In her next picture, The Old Maid, Bette co-starred with Hopkins, and art seemed to imitate life.
You and Clem. But dear, how can that hurt you? You threw Clem away. Clem Spender, you and Clem. Dear, you still love him. You hypocrite. I should never have let you know. I might have known you couldn't forgive that.
Miriam Hopkins. She was a real bitch. It was the worst unprofessional behaved person. She was a terribly good actress. I did 2 films with her. But she was terribly jealous.
Hopkins believed she had good reason to be jealous. She knew of Bette's affair with her husband, and Bette had won an Oscar for Jezebel, playing the part Hopkins had played in the Broadway flop. By the time they appeared together in Old Acquaintance, their animosity could be put to good use.
I'm going to have to tell you something that I hoped I'd never have to tell you. You don't care at all about having lost Preston. If it had been any other woman, you never would have given it a second thought. You only cared because it was me, because you're jealous of me. You've always been jealous of me. You've been jealous of my career, of the kind of life that I lead. I'd better get out of here, Millie, before I do something I'll be very sorry for. Yes, go, go. All right, go ahead and leave me alone, all of you. But you can't take my work away from me. That at least is inviolate. Well, why don't you go? In just a minute. Sorry.
Unafraid to look older than her years, she was 30 when she played 60-year-old Queen Elizabeth in The Private Lives of Elizabeth and Essex. She wanted Laurence Olivier as her co-star and got Errol Flynn instead.
He was just beautiful, Errol. He himself openly said, I don't know anything about acting. Mm-hmm. And I admire his honesty, because he's absolutely right.
Strange how one man's kisses can grow to be like any other's.
Yes, yes, or one woman's to be like any other woman's.
Not mine for you.
Nor mine for you, you lying villain. You double-tongued deceiver. Curse you.
Curse you and double curse you.
She hated her director, the tyrannical Michael Curtiz, but she warmed to her co-star, Olivia de Havilland, who became one of her few lifelong friends outside her family.
The first time I saw Bette Davis, she scared the daylights out of me.
Betty, that's the voice of your good pal who flew in all the way from Paris, France, just to be with you, Miss Olivia de Havilland.
Marvelous. Oh, I haven't seen you for so long. I'm so glad to see you.
Olivia, you mean Betty really scared you?
Nearly to death. We had to make 3 pictures together for her to warm up to me.
Betty,
Really?
is that the way you remember it?
No, I don't remember.
No.
I feel I've always known and loved Olivia, so I don't remember that.
It wasn't really true.
It wasn't true?
No, not
Well, shame
always.
on
Not
me.
at
Shame
the
on
beginning.
Do you remember the
I
titles
was
of those
probably
pictures?
jealous of you. You were so damn good looking.
In 1940, the 32-year-old Betty met her second husband, Arthur Farnsworth, a New Englander with a secret drinking problem. By the time of Now Voyager, for which she won her 5th consecutive Oscar nomination, Betty was the undisputed queen of Warners. She was now able to handpick her directors and to run roughshod over them. She chose the inexperienced Irving Rapper, who had been her dialogue coach, and proceeded to make his life miserable by taking charge on the set.
It's only when you get a very inferior director that you must be tough. It's that important.
I can't get you out of my mind. Nor out of my heart either. If I were free, there would be only one thing I want to do. Prove you're not immune to happiness. Would you want me to prove it, Charlotte? Tell me you would. Then I'll go. Why, darling, you are crying.
Oh, I'm such a fool. Such an old fool. These are only tears of gratitude. An old maid's gratitude for the crumbs offered.
Don't talk like that.
You see, no one ever called me darling before.
In the script, it said that I should hand Bette Davis, offer Bette Davis a cigarette. So I suggested to Betty to simplify this whole thing and just have 2 cigarettes and light them both at the same time and offer her one. Betty adored it. Our director didn't like it, I remember. He didn't like the idea at all.
He didn't like much of anything.
No.
However, the result was a sentimental classic, the Hollywood soap opera at its most sublime.
We both try hard to protect that little strip of territory that's ours. We can talk about your child.
Our child.
Thank you.
And will you be happy, Charlotte?
Oh, Jerry, don't let's ask for the moon. We have the stars.
You may be one of 5 people in the United States of America that can light up a cigarette on television with
If I
impunity.
didn't smoke a cigarette, they would not know who I was.
Give me a cigarette. How about a little light, honey?
Will you have a cigarette?
You carry your own cigarette.
Cigarette? No, thanks.
Throwing herself into the war effort in 1942, Davis and actor John Garfield founded the Hollywood Canteen and enlisted industry people to help entertain the troops.
Betty.
Thank you.
Miss Davis, meet Slim, the one-man army.
Hello, Slim.
Holy smoke. You're Mrs. Skeffington. I mean Bette Davis, aren't you? I saw you on the hospital ship before you were even released on the mainland.
Betty even sang for the cause.
They're either too warm or too cold. They're either too fast or too fast asleep. So, darling, believe me, I'm yours to keep. There isn't any gravy. The gravy's in the Navy.
A year later, Davis's 2.5-year marriage to Arthur Farnsworth ended suddenly when he collapsed and died on a Los Angeles street. Betty spent even more time helping out at the canteen, where she met Corporal Lewis Riley and astonished Hollywood when she followed him to Fort Benning. But Riley went overseas, and not long after, at a party in Laguna Beach, Betty met sailor William Grant Sherry, a bodybuilder and amateur artist. 5 weeks later, she impulsively married him. Betty discovered on her wedding night that Sherry was prone to sudden violent rages. Betty had dished out plenty of abuse on screen, but she wasn't prepared for being abused herself.
You can go down deeper, stay under longer, and come up dirtier than any man I've ever known.
You make me so mad I could
Spit. If you had any pride, if you were a man instead of a drooling milksop, you'd throw me out and be ashamed to admit that you'd ever married me.
Please leave that for me!
Why you care? No!
Now will you relax?
In 1947, at age 39, she gave birth to her daughter, Barbara Davis Sherry, whom she called BD.
I got a beautiful daughter from one of these awful marriages. So there's good out of everything. I couldn't mind an hour of what that was like for BD. I really couldn't. And I think my life right now without children would be a sad and sorry affair.
2 years later, afraid for her child's safety and her own, she filed for divorce. Once again, she had married the wrong man.
My family doctor said, I have one question to ask you. How can an intelligent woman like you choose such idiots? I cared very much about being with a man. And it was very important for me to be in love and to be married.
After all her battles with Warner's over the quality of her films, Davis finally won the right to produce her own movies. A new 5-year contract at $115,000 per picture committed her to making 14 movies, 5 of which she could choose and produce herself for her own company. Yet Davis didn't take advantage of the opportunity. She produced only one movie, the routine melodrama A Stolen Life, and a few years later, quietly disbanded her company, and then promptly returned to complaining about the roles Warner's wouldn't let her play. After the war, the mood of the nation changed. For the first time, Betty had 3 flop movies in a row. It was a bad time to be the epitome of the strong, independent woman.
Don't give me that. You're not firing me because Jean Brinker ran off with the man that she should have married in the first place. It's because you're madly in love with me, and to you, that's a sign of weakness.
Oh, you're incredible, utterly incredible, perched up on that pinnacle of masculine ego, looking down at poor, weak, defenseless females and pitying them because they don't have beards.
Had a beard, I wouldn't look at you twice.
Very amusing and a typical male reaction to intellectual defeat.
Me, intellectually
I've run
defeated.
into that attitude before. Every woman does the minute she starts to make a career for herself. Get back to the kitchen, mother. It's a man's world.
Beyond the Forest for director King Vidor would be her last at Warner's. Too old for her role as the adulterous femme fatale Rosa, her acting verged on self-parody.
Oh, you can write then.
What are you getting at?
Well, you told me once you stopped going to school when you were 9. I thought maybe you'd never learned. That's the excuse I made to myself for those letters I didn't get.
Anything I had to say to you, I wouldn't put on paper.
Say it now.
I don't need words.
In 1949, Bette asked to be released from her contract. Jack Warner cold-bloodedly assessed the 41-year-old's diminished box office clout and let her go with no argument. She had spent almost 2 decades trudging up and down the Warner staircases.
I finished 18 years at Warner's, built many sound stages there, never got a letter of goodbye, ended up in the back lot with a sound man, Heinz Blanke, a producer, till dawn, having drinks, and that's how I left the Warner lot.
A year after leaving Warner's, All About Eve proved to be her artistic revenge. It was the most nominated film in Hollywood history, with 14 nominations and 6 Oscars. Although the role of Margot Channing was not written for Bette, it became indelibly linked with Bette's legend. Joseph Mankiewicz wrote the part for Claudette Colbert.
I was never cast as Margot Channing in All About Eve. I was a replacement, and a most happy replacement.
For whom?
Colbert was playing Margot Channing, and she hurt her back.
You're a beautiful and an intelligent woman.
A body with a voice.
A beautiful and an intelligent woman and a great actress. A great actress at the peak of her career. You have every reason for happiness.
Except happiness.
Every reason. But due to some strange, uncontrollable, unconscious drive, you permit the slightest action of a kid like... Of a kid like Eve to turn you into an hysterical, screaming harpy. Now, once and for all, stop it.
I was so kind of efficient and in charge of myself that no man would possibly think I would want someone to watch over me. Gary Merrill and I thought he was Bill Sampson and would take care of me. He thought I was Margot Channing and would be just like Margot and all dressed up and very actressy all my life.
Funny business, a woman's career. The things you drop on your way up the ladder so you can move faster. You forget you'll need them again when you get back to being a woman. It's one career all females have in common, whether we like it or not. Being a woman. And in the last analysis, nothing's any good unless you can look up just before dinner or turn around in bed. And there he is. Without that, you're not a woman.
Hoping that this marriage would be the one that lasted, Merrill became her 4th husband. Returning to their Yankee roots, they settled in Maine in a seacoast house called Witchway. With Merrill, she adopted 2 children, Margot and Michael. Their little girl, Margot, suffered from brain damage and had to be institutionalized.
It was terrible. My mother said, send her back. I said, would I have sent Bette back? I made a deal. And actually, Margot's had a great life due to the fact that I could afford to have her in a beautiful school. For 20-some years, she spent every summer with me and every Christmas.
It's a difficult thing to see your mother on the screen, especially in the different roles. I could say that was difficult because in the one moment, here she is, your mother, walking around the house, cooking your meals and everything, and there she is playing some glamorous lady in a movie. But as I grew older, there's no problem. I saw it as her job and realized how good she was at it.
Their heavy drinking, often violent marriage ended in divorce 10 years later.
I went to Joseph Mankiewicz, the director, author. I said, Joe, please make a sequel to Margot and Bill. You must. It would be fascinating. Well, we met at a party a few years later, and I said, Joe, you can forget that sequel. I played it, and it doesn't work.
In the 50s, when Bette discovered that the leading lady roles were fading into secondary character parts, she even did a commercial.
You've never done a commercial before.
No, I've never done a commercial before. As a matter of fact, there really isn't enough money to get me to do a commercial about a product I didn't believe in. And I think Awake is delicious.
Eager for work, Bette shocked the industry when she took out an ad in Variety.
There's no question about it. The big romance of my life, really, underneath, was this work I do.
In 1961, working again at Warner's, she had her second great comeback in the hit Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
I always felt that Jane was the kind that never washed her face. She just added the makeup each day.
Her rivalry with co-star Joan Crawford was milked for all the publicity it was worth, but there was fire behind the smoke. The two had been chilly rivals at Warner's in the mid-40s, and Bette claimed that Crawford saw to it that she didn't win a third Oscar for Baby Jane.
When she saw to it, I didn't get the Oscar for Baby Jane. She went to all the New York nominees and said, please do not vote for her. She was so jealous. I was furious because that would have made me the first person with 3. That was one Oscar I really felt I would get.
For all her honors and success, no amount of acclaim ever calmed her restless, fighting spirit. Whether her movies were art or trash, she threw herself into each role as if her life depended on it. And perhaps it did. Even in her 70s, rather than retiring to her dressing room, Bette would stay on the set, hanging out with the crew, and reveling in the atmosphere of the workplace, her true home. Retirement was never an option. The proud Yankee in her wouldn't rest, and the diva in her couldn't give up the limelight. In 1977, she became the first woman honored with the American Film Institute's Life Achievement Award.
The American Film Institute's Life Achievement Award is to me the frosting on the cake of my career.
She returned to live in Los Angeles, moving into the Colonial House in West Hollywood and taking a role in the TV series Hotel. She also appeared in 3 features and 8 films for television. At 75, Bette suffered a disastrous illness.
I had a stroke, mastectomy, and yeah, you run into all sorts of things much, much older. Nobody really did think at my age I would live.
Catherine Cermak, her assistant and confidant, pulled her through the illness and gave her the will to live.
She stayed in the hospital room with me the entire time with the mastectomy and stroke. And every day would say to me, we'll make it. And I did.
Together, they wrote a book about the recovery. Ironically, at the same time, her daughter BD was working on a book of her own.
Oh, I think I would like to be missed and respected by my children always. I think that would mean the most to me, although I'll never know.
But she found out when her daughter devastated her in print with the publication of her book, My Mother's Keeper.
Well, we can hardly have the same close relationship after a book like that is written about you. No. No, it's just as simple as that. I lost her. Realizing that she had written this kind of a book about me was as catastrophic as the stroke was to me.
They never spoke again. Frail but unstoppable, she went on to make 3 films in the next 2 years.
Of course, you can imagine my terror that I would never act again. Oh, it was agony. But I did.
In 1987, co-starring with silent film legend Lillian Gish, she made The Whales of August.
We're so different, you and I. We're strong stock, Sarah. And we've precious little time left.
In 1989, she traveled to Spain to receive an award at the San Sebastian Film Festival and became ill. Bette Davis died in Paris on October 6th, 1989. She was 81 years old.
But on my tombstone is going to be written, Mr. Mankiewicz's suggestion. She did it the hard way. And she did.
It has been my experience, Davis wrote, that one cannot depend on human relations for any lasting reward. It is only work that truly satisfies. To the end, she never stopped working. And off-screen, she never gave up playing the role of a lifetime, herself. She played it to the hilt. I guess I'm larger than life. That's my problem, she once said. It was a problem that made her millions of fans eternally grateful.
Her hair is hollow gold, her lips sweet surprise. Her hands are never cold. She's got Bette Davis eyes. She'll turn her music on you. You won't have to think twice. She's pure as New York snow. She got Bette Davis eyes. And she'll tease you, she'll unease you, all the better just to please you. She's precocious, and she knows just what it takes to make a pro blush. She got Greta Garbo, standoff size. She's got Bette Davis eyes.
And so many people know me. I wish I did. I wish someone would tell me about me.